I feel like we had a really good conversations about this morning. I think people were thinking about why a core member might be very willing to turn in their tools, but not really see purpose in them. I think that we were making a lot of connections about how the core member who's the I'll do it for TFA core member is less likely to be Unit 1 ready. And so even if they do collect Unit 1 data and are progress known, this seems like the person who's more likely to end up in off track or possibly within reach and struggle to meet their goals because they're ultimately doing tools to do them rather than actually learning how to backwards plan. And so this seems really important, of course, to think about at the core member level, to think about how you're going to bring your core to the purpose of Unit 1 ready. But I also think it's important to think about at the PD level because even in that last, in the core member I session and in our recent discussions, I think we are making connections about how, what pitfalls PDs may have in addressing core members like that, and actually also how PDs may actually contribute to that pitfall. So I'd love to just hear a few comments from the conversations you had in your groups about what can hold PDs back about either addressing the I'll do it for TFA pitfall or that they may be contributing to that pitfall. Tani.
We were discussing here that something that can hold program directors back, whether they're returning or new, is not knowing what their subgroups of core members are, as far as like not knowing which core members are waiting for district tools, not knowing which core members are necessarily placed. So we just thought that like they would really need to know their group of core members and how they're going to differentiate depending on subject, grade level, 9 and 18 weeks, special, just whatever their mix is, and for every PD it's different. In order to be able to communicate the right purpose and timeline for each group or core member.
Perfect. Great. So it's like PDs might struggle to communicate purposefully because they actually only have a general understanding of what their core members are working on. And if they don't know specifically what their core members are teaching, they might sound general and more process-oriented because they can't be more specific. What other things did you notice held PDs back in that area? Charlie.
I'm Charlie from Baltimore, and I was kind of mentioning like one way that PDs contribute to this was, I think it was Molly or someone who said that there's a tendency like to check off like, oh, it's done, and then like not infuse it into your work with the core member. And so if someone just like sends you a PD stuff and then they never hear back from you about it, or it's not ever used in your work with their students, I think it can send a message that it is just for TFA because we didn't use it in your classroom. So then making sure you then set yourself up to actually follow up and use it with your work with them.
Great. So PDs may not fully enough understand where the tools fit into the Ground Zero strategy themselves, or may not fully understand how to help core members implement them. Is that right? And so then when the core members go to complete the tools, they don't get a purposeful response. And it seems like there's both the PD's understanding of the purpose of the strategy, and then also the PD's ability to communicate purposefully that I feel like we're talking about here. Diana?
I'm also thinking of the PD's ability to adjust for situations where sometimes, depending on the curriculum, what their tools look like will vary. And so if a PD isn't aware of that, they might be having core members use the template in this exact way because this is what they know, and not infusing what the core members are actually using in their classroom.
Lindsay, I think I saw you. Did I? Go ahead.
One thing we talked about was how this is just harder to diagnose, and so we would also put PDs with follow-up questions and indicators that they would be looking for in either core member responses or in classroom pop-ins that would indicate that core members are understanding the role of deliverables beyond just doing it for
So I actually think that I'm hearing a series of comments that I think are bringing me to what I think is a deeper issue going on. I think we're pulling out aspects of the extent to which our PDs are set up to be really purposeful in their interactions with their core members, whether it's how they communicate, whether it's whether they recognize that the core member isn't seeing a purpose in their Round Zero work. whether it's their ability to help their core members really use these tools or recognize that they need to take this step to make sure their core members are using those tools. And it actually brings me back to what I think is an issue with how our PD core member relationships are currently oriented. And I think this comes back to the conference frame that Michelle and Zoe and Kunjan talked about yesterday, which is we've made a lot of strides this year in increasing core member satisfaction and have built some really important and sophisticated skills where PDs learn how to get on the same side of the desk with their core members and build positive relationships. But I think we're talking about a question of to what extent are these relationships truly catalytic, and to what extent are PDs really set up to be purposeful throughout their work, which is I think what we may be recognizing here in the I'll do it for TFA pitfall. And that's what I'd love for us to dig in deeper. I think this is, if we're really wanting to take our PD core member relationships to the next level and for them to be truly transformative for our teachers, I think we should understand both all of the progress that we made in this area last year and then also what it will take to shift them to the next level, which is I think a very exciting place for us to be, but I think it warrants us taking a look together and looking where we are. So what we're going to do is watch a Round Zero conversation video from DC, and thank you so much to the DC team for videoing several Round Zero conversations. They did a lot of work in norming and setting up their team to set clear expectations, set up their PDs for effective early relationships, and I think we're going to see a lot of signs here of the strengths and strides we made across the board here. I also think that this video is representative of what we may need to shift, and I'm really excited for us to think about that too. So we're going to watch about 4 to 5 minutes of this video. As you're watching, I'd like you to be trying to answer 2 questions. The first one is, to what extent is this a positive relationship? And I say that thinking about really what our goals were last year and the strides we made in satisfaction last year. And then the second question I'd like you to answer is, to what extent is this relationship going to be transformative? Something to keep in mind is if you had 1 or 2 things to change about it, what would those things be? All right. And I want to thank